Yeah, so I think that xlov really encapsulates what we think about when we think about gender expansiveness over just like this binary, just being trans-binary, right? They do go by any pronouns. They do position themselves, sometimes more masculine, sometimes more feminine. Some of them seem to be more gender fluid. Some of them, have certain ways that they, right? Like Rui has sort of talked about the prince versus the princess. Muti has sort of been clear about like, you can go by any pronouns, but if I look really pretty that day, like you can, I think she was saying you can call me Nuna, or you can call me Uni, rather. So like, but it is not, and I really like that they haven't actually taken a position on any of their genders, and if any of them do, fantastic, like good for them for being outright about it. But by saying that they have this gender neutral, and I think that it has evolved from gender neutral. I think gender neutral was like the easy on-ramp, right? I think it's evolved from gender neutral to gender expansive. By sort of laying down that framework, by, being open about going by any pronouns, which is coming out. Like saying I go by any pronouns is coming out. Just because they haven't defined the label as what they've come out as does not mean they have not come out, right? They have. And by having these differences in styling and such, they're really exploring what it is more than just like to be trans-binary or even to be trans non-binary, what it is to just like say fuck it to all of that. That's part of the reason why I really like the movement of terminology towards gender expansiveness, is because like I think a lot of trans folks, and this is the joke about like when trans folks talk to cis people, we'll just be like, yeah, I'm trans. These are my pronouns, period. When trans folks talk to trans people, we have like a dissertation on our gender to give out, right? So like I say I'm agender, and that like, I think generally what I'll tell people is that like, I'll go by whatever pronouns you feel fit the vibe that day, as long as you recognize I'm not a woman. And like even that feels a little complex for most cis folks. But when I talk to trans folks, what I'll be like is like, well, I'm sort of in this kind of weird gender fluid place between agender and this kind of like non-binary femininity of like, or like mid-binary femininity, wherein sometimes I want to put on the feminine mask, or I'll put on the female outfit, and like I wish I could put on the male outfit more often, but the male outfit really doesn't fit my body. So like it just doesn't, I don't have an appropriate outfit for that presentation right now. But like sometimes I'm really into putting on the right outfit for the feminine presentation, and at that point I probably prefer like she or maybe they, but mostly I'm right. Like you start to you talk to any trans person, and you're now deconstructing the entire concept of gender, in a way that you simply wouldn't with cis people who, especially cis people who haven't been around the topics and just like don't get it as much, right? And I think that like this, what xlov is doing is so interesting because it's so openly going into that area that normally trans folks only really engage with each other, right? We sort of gatekeep those conversations from cis people. And we sort of gatekeep the conversation about like, maybe gender and gender presentation are just the same thing. But like, we don't say that to cis people because we don't actually want cis people who don't got to think that gender and gender presentation are the same thing, like societally, right? This is like a philosophical, multi-layered, deep, like you already have to unpack a whole bunch of things. It's sort of the you have to understand the rules to break the rules type of thing. And xlov is just going like, let's break the rules. Let's just openly and outwardly say fuck the rules. And we are going to expand into every possibility of presentation that we can just because we can. And I think that that's what is so appealing to so many queer folks who, like, I think a lot of us wish we could engage in more interesting, nuanced conversations about gender and sexuality and intimacy and, somaticism and whatever with cis people, with het people, with cis het people, het trans folks, sort of a different matter, but like, I think we wish we could do that, but it is so difficult. And het trans people are going to be a lot easier to engage in these conversations than cis, otherwise sexually queer folks, who can be really difficult to engage in these conversations with, because sometimes people think that if they're queer, they understand queerness, regardless of whether they actually understand being trans, because it is different from being bi, right? It's very, very different. So I think that that's like part of what's so appealing, is that in some ways we're bringing this conversation to audiences that we normally gatekeep this conversation from. And I think that that's a really powerful decision that they've made.